see, is I'm going to post the attendance tracker in our chat right now. I just did that. And then with about 10 minutes left, I'll post the session survey in the chat as well, so you guys can complete that. And then Yvonne and I will be monitoring the chat. She's going to try to answer your questions in there. Since I can't, I can just flag them. So, but that way we both can help make sure all of your questions are answered. And yeah, all right, take it away, Lindsay.
Awesome. Okay. And we are going to be pretty interactive, so please don't feel shy to raise your hand, stop us, add stuff in to the chat as we go through. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about, originally I was going to talk about the 5 whys, but instead I made a slight alteration to talking about some trends that we've seen in science of reading because it's really a change management process. And it requires everybody in your district to kind of help pave the way. So my name is Lindsay Bartz. I'm a literacy specialist with Amplify. I have been a teacher in kindergarten, 2nd grade, high school, work with middle school students. And my favorite book to read to my kids was Junie B. Jones. And if anybody else loved that series, feel free to make me feel, like I'm with company. But before we get started, I actually wanted everyone to, in the chat, type in their most memorable book that they read as a child or in their adolescence. What's the most memorable book that you had, and maybe like who read it to you, or did you read it to someone else? The Babysitter's Club. Has anybody seen the graphic novel that's there? Love You. Oh, I love Love You Forever. Oh, The Wizard of Oz. Oh, Boxcar Children. Yes, I love the Boxcar Children. Awesome. Okay, Charlotte's Web. These are all, yeah. So, okay, and we still have stuff. Black Stallion, Amber Brown. Good. Oh, Judy Blume. Oh, Judy Blume's books are great. Yeah. Yvonne, do you have a favorite book that you remember reading? Oh, Treasure Island. Mark. Secret Garden. Awesome. Thank you. So, oh, shoot. So the whole purpose of why I kind of asked you guys to do that is because we're going to talk about, we read, and we're going to talk about how our brain developed that ability the capacity to be able to read. And then 5 trends that we're seeing in school districts that are that they are doing, implementing as a part of this change management process. So the first place I wanted to start was here, in that we all have these favorite books, and this image of our kids being enthralled by literature and learning and having these memories of reading books, that's what we want. We really want our kids to have that. But when we look at the statistics of whether or not, what the percentage of kids in our country that are having that experience, I don't know if you guys have seen the National Assessment of Educational Process data, but it looks at the overall, the entire country, in kids that are of all demographics, of all areas in education. And it shows that only about 54, a little actually less than that, 46% of kids are having that experience of learning those books and reading and being able to engage in that process. And I think you guys, I don't know if you've ever heard of the pipeline of the school to prison pipeline, but that's kind of why those 3rd grade reading skills are set, because a lot of states will look at what their literacy proficiencies are and then make plans for construction for prisons around there, because it's just such a critical thing to do. And so when we look at our country, unfortunately, that's just not where we are. And when we look at Nevada specifically, after the last 2 years in the pandemic, just like every single state saw, they saw a decline in the amount of students that were having proficient readers. So that's why we see this science of reading trend sweeping the country right now. And if you haven't seen any, feel free to add into the chat if you've seen things on Educational Weekly, if you've heard hard words written by Emily Hanford, an investigative journalist of the Hechinger Report. It's just sweeping the country, asking, looking at Sold a Story. Oh, that's a new one. I'll have to listen to that. The Sold a Story podcast. Does anybody want to come off and share? If you want to come off and share, I'll pause for a second to tell us a little bit about what that is, because I've not heard it, and it might be excellent. Or just share it into the chat so that everyone has access to it.
So I've only listened to the first 5 episodes. It's Emily. You just said her name, Emily.
That's right, Emily Hanford. She's got a new podcast out that just came.
Yes.
Yeah,
So that,
okay.
and I have cried, I have yelled, I have argued. It just brings up so many emotions about where we are and where our country has been with reading, and
Michelle.
it's absolutely amazing. I recommend it to everybody.
Okay, great. And hopefully we'll actually have, if we don't have time, I have a powerful a documentary trailer that I would love to share too. And thank you, Megan, for sharing your passion about this. And if anybody wants to just hit on the passion that Megan shared in the chat and just say, yeah, I feel you too. Like, please, by all means, I want this to be completely collaborative, because that's one of the trends that we'll go into is collaboration and background. So what I would just want to hear is Natalie Wexler. She's one of the voices. Emily Hanford is another voice. Tim Shanahan is another voice. If you haven't heard the Science of Reading podcast, we're going to experience that for just a quick second here today. But Natalie Wexler is one of the voices, and her whole stance is that we need to be teaching these isolated foundational literacy skills within a knowledge building environment. So we're going to take a look at what she has to say about that, about this. Real quick video.
Those tests, which have become the yardstick by which we measure progress.
Hopefully.
Those tests, which have become the yardstick by which we measure progress, you look at them and they seem to be measuring reading comprehension skills. They're asking kids, so read this passage, find the main idea, make inferences. And so teachers naturally, and administrators, they think, well, that's what's being tested, are those skills. So we need to just double down on drilling kids on those skills, overlooking the fact that one reason kids often score low on those tests is they don't have the background knowledge to understand the reading passages in the first place. It's not that they can't make an inference. They make inferences in their lives all the time, Yep. Even toddlers can make an inference. So that's not the problem so much as they lack the background knowledge and vocabulary to understand the passage. And that has been a big problem that's been overlooked.
Yeah. So that's her perspective on background knowledge.
Those tests, which have...
There we go. Sorry about that. So that's her so she's really all about the background knowledge. But I want to take here just a second to read and reflect here. This passage. I'm going to give us about 90 seconds to read and share something in the chat about how this hits home with us as educators. So go ahead. We'll take about 90 seconds. So if anybody wants to start, either come off audio, there's only 48 of us, so please feel free to share an audible or share something in the chat that might have hit home with you with this. Yes, reading is like, yeah, reading, it's a completely different, it's a completely different experience of being able to access, and I can't click on this at the same time. Yeah. Astounding feat. Yeah, thank you for that share. I really like that reading is so easily taken for granted. We're upset about character that died in the book that oh, really? Oh, I'm glad this is kind of hitting home. Great. Thank you. Thank you for those shares. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, where that came from, but where I want to start with is the brain, because like, someone had mentioned that it's a new language. It is actually a new part of the brain that we have to develop. So what we're looking at here is a picture of a brain that is actively using the making meaning part. This is the left side of the brain. That's really important because that's where all the reading is happening, on the left hemisphere of our brain. And what we're seeing right here is that there's a bunch lit up right here in this part of our brain, right? But in the back right there, it's completely dark. So we see a little bit of red and it's completely dark. That's because this part of our brain is developed for listening and making meaning of things. But the back part of our brain is dark, because we aren't like pre-wired to be able to do that. That's why I love that we take it for granted aspect of that saying. So we have to, as teachers, by learning this science, I've realized that we are basically the neuroscientists that are weaving the aspects of the brain together in order for kids to be able to do this amazing thing. So what you'll see here is, again, that picture of the left hemisphere. And if you want to have some kinesthetic experience with our time together, so you can further internalize some of this information, if you haven't seen it already, you can put your hand right here, because this is the part of the brain that is the language comprehension. A lot of the language comprehension aspect is what's coming from this part of the brain. And when we're born, it is already pre-wired for listening and taking in. That's how we become that speaking and listening, those speaking and listening beings. But you remember back here that black, and that's why that aspect of the brain it's lit up right here, because it's already pre-wired. But that back part is black, right? And you can see here, that's where we call the visual word form area, or it's the part, it's back here. It's a completely part of our brain. So what this part of our brain does is it's going to do all the orthographic mapping, that letter sound correspondence, that translation of that new language that we're learning, but we have to wire it first. So let's just get a little context. We're going to do a little activity, and we're going to dive back into what it was like before we understood what the characters in the English language meant. And I'm going to take about 2 minutes here, and I want you all, and I'm going to put in a sunlight timer here in a second, but I want us all to try and translate this on a piece of paper. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, sketch something out, or if you have an iPad, whatever you have. But I'm going to start the timer, and I want us to take 2 minutes to see who can get this, decode this particular sentence. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer now. Okay, we have about a minute left. Oh, did someone already solve it? Oh man, good job, Joanne. So Joanna already solved it, but it was cumbersome, right? Like it was cumbersome to finally get that Kit ran and hid. And so I love this activity because it really gives us insight into how our kids what they have to do in order to get that comprehension that Natalie Lexler was said. So I, as a child, grew up playing the piano. And then in my later, in the last few years, flash forward like 25 years, I decided that I needed to pick it back up. But I didn't remember how to play the music because I couldn't remember the notes and what I didn't know the symbolication of what the music notes were for the keys on the compute on my keyboard. So what I had to do was go through and digraph, which means I had to label each one of them in order to play a song. And the whole time I was doing that, I kept thinking about the kids that I underserved because I didn't provide them the word recognition instruction that they did. And so now, like, that's what I think about, that when we put if you put a piece of text in front of your students, it's like putting a piece of sheet music in front of someone that can't play it if they haven't had the systematic and explicit instruction to do the neurogenesis work that needs to happen in that dark part of our brain for us to recognize and be able to acquire this ability to read and write. So, but through the science of reading and that shift that we're moving to, which, like, I use foundational, I use Fontes and Pinnell, and I use that type of instruction, that balanced literacy instruction, and I still did see strength or growth with my students. But I was really only focusing on that making meaning part of the brain. And I wasn't building this, what we call, see this red part? And if y'all want to say this out loud, it's one of my favorite words. It's called the phonological processing highway, meaning that that through the systematic explicit instruction that we're providing our students in those foundational literacy skills, every single day, bit by bit, we're building this highway so that students can automatically, fluently access all of that orthographic mapping that we are teaching our brains to do in that back part. So that's what the whole idea is of what we need to do first before we ask our student. We need to teach our students to swim before we throw them out into the deep end, is what I've learned. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to watch a video of this professor, his name, and if you haven't seen him, or if you have seen him, show it in the chat, and I'll share this video with you. Actually, I have a document that already has it on you, but this guy, his name is Dr. DeHaan, and he is a psychologist. He's a cognitive psychologist. I mean, he's not an educator. He studies the brain and how the brain acquires the ability to do all these skills. And we're going to walk through his explanation of how the brain acquires that.
I mean it. I think if you want to change the system, you have to understand how it works. What are the rules of operation? And I believe that empowering teachers with the appropriate knowledge of the principles of brain plasticity and education will lead to better classroom practices. There's a lot we know already. You can read what they wrote 2,000 years ago. You can communicate thought, essential in order to test education protocols and to quantify their effects on behavior and on the brain. And finally, I believe also that cognitive neurosciences can participate in the development of teaching devices, such as school curricula, manuals, or software. I'll give an example of that at the end. So today, I want to talk specifically about the topic of reading and what we understand about it from the brain's point of view. If you had not learned to read, any page of text would look to you like this stone, a texture, but no meaning. But because you've learned to read, you can have a conversation with the deceased, you can speak to the dead, you can listen to the dead with your eyes, because you can read what they wrote 2,000 years ago. You can communicate thoughts to the mind through the eye, which is the great invention of the world, according to Lincoln. So how does that work? Well, This is a picture of your left hemisphere. The left hemisphere of the brain is most essential for language and reading. And just to orient you, this is the back of the brain. This is the front of the brain. It's been slightly inflated, so you can see inside the folds. And now I want to show you the activation of the brain as you read one word. We see it in time. So let me start this. Here we go. And you have the word unfolding from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. It will loop several times. You can see the information enters into the occipital pole, which is the visual side of the brain, moves into the ventral areas, and then explodes into the left hemisphere distributed activity. I have no time, of course, to explain to you all of the details of this brain activity, but I want to show you a sort of caricature that you can remember. And it's very simply that reading starts as any other visual stimulation in these generic visual areas of the occipital pole of the brain, but then very quickly moves into an area that we have discovered, which concentrates the recognition of the written word. I have called it the brain's letterbox, because it is where we store our knowledge of letters. And from there, what you have seen is this explosion of activity into at least two networks, one that concerns the meaning of the words, and another that concerns the pronunciation and the articulation of the word. And so we can say essentially from the brain's point of view that learning to read consists first in recognizing the letters and how they combine into written words, and second, connecting them to these systems coding for speech sounds and for meaning. And what is rather remarkable is that all of the areas in orange and in green here already exist for spoken language. They are shared between spoken language and written language. So not only that, but they already exist in a young child. We can image the brain of young babies, even when they are extremely young, few months of age. We have various methods for that. And when we have them listen to language, we already see this network of regions which exist also in the adult brain and that process spoken language.
So we're going to stop right here. And he has said some pretty, there is a specific part of the brain. It starts with an O. Did anybody catch it? That is the small region of our brain that systematically activates whenever we read. Starts with an O. Did anybody catch? Yep. Okay, good job, Rachel. Yes, Melissa. Yes, you guys were your listening ears, or maybe you've researched this before, but it's the occipital lobe. That's in the back part of our brain. And that's what's beautiful about learning. And even though, yes, we do have this group of students, this very large group of students that aren't professional readers and writers, we now know the science behind it. And when you know better, we do better, right? We all do that. And the thing that we're finding is the do better aspect of instruction is that science of reading, or in more simple terms, which is not so simple, is the simple view of reading, meaning that we have to have word recognition and we have to have language comprehension, including background knowledge to read and gain meaning from what we're doing. And 1 times 0 equals 0, meaning if we don't have one, then we don't have the other. So looking more intensely at that, when we look at what specific skills go into each one of these regions, we see within word recognition that this is where we have to have that systematic explicit instruction within that word recognition, and then also into language comprehension. And then the instruction needs to be reflective of where students are at that stage of development in reading. So this is why when we have kindergarten through 2nd grade, or when I was a 2nd grade teacher, I really did, even though I found word recognition kind of boring. It wasn't about me. That was my cognitive bias. I really needed to be providing my students the explicit instruction in those specific areas that they needed. Because when they get up to 6 and 8, some of the 6th and 8th grade, and then even in high school, they have these huge gaps, and kids cannot comprehend the text. They can't use critical thinking skills to extract information that they're reading because they can't understand it, because they unknowingly, there wasn't the instruction that was reflecting the science. So what we'll do today is we're going to walk through, we've done some research and looked at different schools that are having success in this change management process of implementing the science of reading. And so we're going to talk about 5 of the patterns that have been seen that have proven to be the most successful. And as we go through these, I would love for us to provide points of reference of how this is either capable where you live already, or maybe some of the things that are already going on as we go through each one of these trends. So the first trend we'll take a look at is not a surprise. That, just like what Dr. DeHaan was explaining, is that development for literacy starts inside the womb. So starting early and providing some type of summer reading programs at libraries, providing preschool. This is why preschool, Head Start, all of those things, you guys know that these are really, really important. So can someone share in the chat some of the different ways that they have initiatives of starting early? A lot of states, a lot of states are having a lot of early childhood funding that are going on because they recognize. So what are some different ways that we're seeing that you're making the shift to focusing on starting on those decoding and building vocabulary aspects early? We took away preschool. Oh, we don't want to take away preschool. We want to add preschools. I'm sorry to hear that, Megan. That is preschool is one of those things that we really do need, but also, yeah, like the Read 3 initiative would be nice. Head Start is a great place. Oh, no, really. Community support to work with families. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, schools, I just always feel that the school system is the central hub for the entire community, and they're the ones that have all of the information that oftentimes needs to be delegated out to educating parents. Oh, literacy night. That's a great idea. Full day kindergarten. Yes, another great idea. Oh, read aloud sessions. Great. Full day kindergarten. All of those. Yep. Good. These are all awesome things that I know our school district, I live in a rural area, guest readers in young classrooms. I know that's something that we're trying really hard to do. I live in a rural area, is get preschool. We have a huge waiting list of preschool, and our Head Start is already maxed out. So we have a lot of kiddos that aren't making it into those areas or getting into those resources, which is unfortunate. And then I love Danae's, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that right, but providing parents with skills to assist their children, especially English as a second language parents. These are great. These are great initiatives. So thank you guys for sharing that. The second one is surrounding our kids with books. So a lot of us, I don't know about you guys, but I know that a lot of my students live in a book desert, meaning that they don't have access to books. So some of the things that we've seen school districts do is obviously try to use some of their ESSER funds or their dollars to provide books. You know, teachers that are always on Scholastic trying to, or you know, maybe have book libraries that they're trying to build their books. But some other examples I have seen, and maybe you guys have seen this, are some book drives where they're providing free books to the impoverished folks in their community. I don't know if anybody has seen something like that, but trying to educate parents on the value of that. If you start early and surround kids with books, that they will already be at this level of being able, because they have that part of their brain that is just so developed, that making meaning part of their brain that is just so developed. So that's another trend that we see. Any grants or any ways of connecting with the library, books, grants to get books in the hands of kids, surrounded by books. That's another trend that we're seeing. So if you have, oh yes, I was going to say the Dolly Parton thing. Yeah, we actually, a real small county next to me, like no money, just they work together, and now they have, it's like a county of less than 20,000 people work together, and they now have the Dolly Parton, the Dolly Parton library that they are being able to hand out books. So thank you for mentioning that. That's another great avenue for surrounding books with kids. So then the third one is that we're going to look at, and this is one that's really, really difficult for districts, and that's figuring out, and that's where that change management process happens, is really it starts with measurement. In outlining what the measurement is going to be, because sometimes it's really easy to get into this trend of over assessing kids because we can't find a specific assessment that is going to assess everything that we need to assess. And so we're in 5 million different things trying to come up with this holistic data so that we can monitor the progress that our instruction is having on our students. So schools that create a community, a committee that sit down and come up with specific assessment guidelines and protocols, and then talk to the teachers, use a train the trainer model to implement these with solid science of reading based instruments. That's what we're seeing here. Is that's the very first thing that we can do, is get on board with whatever our state legislation says, whether or not we like it or not, but get on board with what our state is saying when it comes to measuring our students, and then utilizing that data to drive the instruction and deliver that explicit instruction that students need. So measurement is another thing. And then this thing is number 4, which is my favorite, and what we're really spending the bulk of our time together today, is creating a support team. So the science of reading has a lot of different words. I'm sure y'all could put in a Webster's dictionary of different jargon that you have heard associated to this shift. And there's just been so much myths and things that have been true, but creating a support team around valid sources, which I'm going to share with you all today, are sources that have been vetted and are highly reliable. And then creating a support team where you're always checking in with one another and listening to the latest Emily Hanford podcast and sharing it with a friend. That's where we see the biggest change happen, is when there's a swarm of people that help and support each other in the process of making that happen. That's the very first, next to assessment. Creating the support team is probably the preliminary thing that you have to do before creating that measurement process. So those two things are super, super important. And then the last thing is, we all know that summer is brutal when it comes to students, losing everything that they've learned. And so beating summer, what are some ways actually, and I would love to have you all creating this background knowledge, is creating the support community, share some ways that you're beating summer. I'll go back to the summer reading program. A lot of teachers or a lot of school districts link up with their library to promote that as much as possible with their families, so that they can continue in the value of that and educating parents on the summer reading program. That's one way. After school programs are another way that people are beating summer. They're having summer school that is really, really intensive and it's well thought out. Those are some different ways that we have seen that school districts have been able to, grasp onto beating that summer slip. Is there anything else that we can share out that are some different ways that you can help summer? I know it's such a hard thing to address. Family. Oh, that's a good idea. Family book club, summer reading challenges. Carrie, would you like to come off and kind of explain a little bit more about what a family book club is? Because that's brand new. I've never heard of that. And if I put you on the spot, no worries. You can
That's
type.
okay.
Thank you.
It's
Okay.
okay. I don't mind sharing. So when I was still a classroom teacher, one of the things I found that was helpful to parents was sharing my own experience as a mother trying to get her kids to read over the summer. And I talked to them about how I have 3 children, so I would take turns and they would pick the book. I would read it and they would read it and we would talk about it. And so that kind of developed this idea that parents and children could read books either together, depending on the age of the child, or if they're older, elementary, maybe having the child read it and then the parent read it, and then providing the family with some questions to kind of drive discussion about the book.
Love that. Love that. That actually reminds me of a story that one of my friends just told me. She's a mom and she said that her son was really struggling with reading. And then when she figured that out, she started sitting down and reading to him, and all of a sudden his reading problems went away. And that's not necessarily a beat the summer thing, but just, how powerful sitting down and reading. Aaron B, if you wouldn't mind, I love a good scavenger hunt, and we're going to have a scavenger hunt activity that I'll share with you at, in a couple of slides. Would you mind sharing kind of how the scavenger hunt, works, or if not, you can feel free to throw it into the chat too.
Sure. I just, so I teach in a really small school, so I know all the kids, who are going to be coming into my class next year because there's only 1 teacher per grade level. So I just kind of deliver at the end of the year, I deliver them a little letter that says, I'll be your teacher next year. And then I just give them this little scavenger hunt, and it says I read a book to my pet. I read an article about something that interests me. I read something to a family member. I read a book in a fort, just like different things like that. And then I just say, if you bring this back completed next school year, I'll give you a prize or whatever. And so I've had some success with that. So
that sounds awesome. Do you have, and I encourage you, I am in one of these, I in one of these, I have an online class that I'm doing, and a lot of us will just hit each other up on the side, on the private side, and ask each other for different resources. So feel free to hit each other up and ask for each other's resources. What I would love to do now, oh, we got another chat. So if you can, we're going to wrap up with this part of our presentation before we move into the scavenger hunt aspect of it. And I'm trying to get my document to load up here. But if you all can go to the chat and scroll to the very, very top, and what you'll see is a document that you can download, and it's called the Amplify Primer document. And that's really what we have been focusing a lot of our information on. And I've pulled a lot of slides from there. So go ahead and download that. And then Sarah, I have a question. There's a scavenger hunt document that I had asked Jacqueline to upload into Canvas. Is there any way to see if that did get uploaded or not?
I'll look right now.
Okay. Okay. Because I'm trying to upload it right. Can you post it again? Yep.
Yeah.
I'm trying to upload it right now.
Would it be easier if I put, are you in part 1? Do you want me to put the link up there?
Yeah, if you could put the link in there again, that would be great.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I don't see it in Canvas. Canvas. I don't see.
No worries. It was kind of last minute, so I told her don't worry about it. But just so you guys all have that document, that book. And then if you want a hard copy of it, Yvonne is your Amplify representative up for Nevada, and she would love to mail you a copy of the primer, or both of us would. So go ahead and Yvonne, if you can put I'll put my email in here too. If you can just email one of us, if you want a copy of the primer, email us, because we'll mail you an actual hard copy of it. And so that you can see it, if you like to read things by hand. Okay. So so we have about 10, thank you, Yvonne. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I've downloaded one more document into the chat, and it looks like this. And this is called the Science of Reading Scavenger Hunt. Can you all see this document right here? Okay, great. Okay, so what I've done is we've shared some resources that are going to help in building that community or that body of knowledge within your school district. And so and you can see here that all of them are either, we tried to associate it with all of the different senses, except we didn't have a taste one, obviously. If there's a science, we should get cookies, Yvonne. There we go. There we go. And now we got a taste. But I would like to give you about 3 minutes. Let's do 3 minutes to explore some of the resources on here. And we did put time parameters on here so that you can see. So I just want to give you about 3 minutes again to go and look, to explore this and see what types of resources that you would want to share with a colleague. And then we'll come back and share what you found and why you want to share it. So I'm going to go ahead and start our clock here. Do 3 minutes.
And just so you guys know, to briefly interrupt, I posted the session survey for whenever you guys are ready.
Oh.
Oh, to answer Rachel's question, every session is being recorded. So then we can watch videos later. I don't know about PowerPoints and things like that. So that's a good question.
I'm more than happy to share my PowerPoint though, if someone wants it. I'm sure you'll all do an after follow-up with everyone. So I can share that with you, Sarah, if that's helpful. Yes, please, to the PowerPoint. Okay, Sarah, I'll email it to you.
Okay, yeah. I'll give you my email, and then I can email it to the right people. I know it's just a messenger.
Okay. And we're about a minute in. So, and if you have information that you would want to put into the chat, by all means, but we have about another minute and a half before we move on. Oh, thank you, Sarah. We're at 2 minutes. So in about 45 seconds, I'll have everyone come back together and share something that they liked and that they would want to share with a friend or someone within their district. I heard a sigh. Is everyone okay? Is someone okay? All right, we are going to go ahead and stop the time. And would anybody like to share what they found that they would want to share with a friend, something that they thought was really interesting on their sheet, or did you have issues accessing it? One of those things. What did you find, and who would you share it with? Let's see. I'm gonna get into the chat, show the chat for you there. Do we have anybody chatting? Anybody putting in anything in the chat? Can't see it.
Yep, we do.
So
Right.
that's a definition that we are hanging our hat on now.
Go ahead.
What it might need to be expanded, and maybe we can discuss that now, is what it is not as well as what it is.
You know,
I'll pause if someone wants to chime in here, but
yeah.
There's a lot of currently attention paid to the science of reading, which makes me giddy with joy, because it's been a long time coming for people to even use the term or be curious about the term or hungry to learn what it reveals. But because of all the attention it's getting, it's like the belle of the ball or something like that right now. People want in, and it's starting to worry me and many, many others that the term science of reading is something everyone wants in on, even when they might not really fully understand what it is.
So it's kind of like the new buzzword, isn't it?
What would you like to add to that? Oh gosh, well,
I will say that you know, it's
Before we
very.
get started with today's episode, I just wanted to.
Can you guys hear me okay? This is Yvonne. Okay. I mean, I would say to that, and I will put in a link that we have, and Lindsay, I don't know if you have it handy, but it's that what to look for when you're looking at a science of reading program. I will say that, you know, I don't know, 5 years ago, Amplify had Scarborough's Rope on their marketing information, because that's truly, we partnered with the Core Knowledge Foundation in support of continuing this science of reading journey based on the research and of that explicit instruction. And I think, you know, it's something that if you look at today, you see Scarborough's Rope just pretty much on every program. So there are some things that you might want to look for, you know, when you're looking at, if you're a district that's looking, or you're at a site that's looking at a program, in terms of what are those differentiators and what should we stay away from. You might see programs that have several teacher resources. One of those things, like they have a companion, or they have a you know, a foundational piece, or there's multiple pieces outside of the teacher guide. And that's typically because the program may not have been initially designed for the science of reading. But as the research has grown, and as districts and legislature on early literacy have added dyslexia components, and the discussion of the research has come to the forefront in across the nation, then publishers have reacted, right? And so they're working to add pieces. So it's just something that you want to make sure. It may not be a comprehensive program. Those are areas that you want to make sure that the pieces that they added will meet your needs. Or is it, you know, is it something to add to fill the gap? Or is it truly a science of reading program? Was it developed as a science of reading program? Leveled readers, oftentimes that isn't in that is something that's not contained in their science of research background. So when you see leveled readers out there, that's something that might be, you know, a flag. mini foundational lessons, a flag. So I can get that and put that in the link just to kind of be aware of what to look for and what not to look for.
And actually, to hit on what Yvonne talked about, because I know that your question was specifically about what's the definition. So something that Nevada doesn't have this yet, but that we have talked to the Department of Education about it at Nevada about working with is the Reading League. And if you've heard of the Reading League, put something in the chat. Currently, Nevada doesn't have a chapter, but it's a nonprofit organization that is doing exactly that, providing the professional development and the definitions for what the research actually is. What Yvonne is talking about is a rubric that you can use that was developed by this third-party nonprofit organization whose only mission and only focus is on building valid research-based experiences for kids through the professional development that they provide to teachers and districts and states. Indiana works with them a ton. Wisconsin, Illinois, New York, all these states are working with this nonprofit because they need the support in getting the information and the instruction out to teachers. So one of the things that you'll see on that document is right here. This interview that I just showed you, which is the Science of Reading podcast. If you've never looked at it from Amplify, it's on here too. I know that there was some chat saying, hey, it's only a PDF. I need an actual link. We'll work on getting that fixed too. But when you're looking at what do I need to do, go to figure out what the true definition of it is, go to the Reading League. In this podcast right here, they provide a specific definition of what that is. And it's not from educators. It's from the National Panel of Reading that they were able to extract and develop this definition. But the end of the day is that if we are it all comes back to our brain and building the neurology to be able to do that. We only have about a minute left, and but there's one other thing I want you guys to make sure that you see if you haven't seen it. If you haven't Googled it, Google the truth about reading, the truth about reading. It's a video that's being developed by the John Cochrane Foundation, and it's basically exposing this issue that we've had across the country when it comes to reading instruction. Goes through even the reading wars that happened back, from starting in the late 80s and early 90s to where we are today. So with that being said, please email us. Email us, share information, give us feedback on what we were able to provide you. We will email you the link and follow up with the PowerPoint and a link to that document. But we'll be here for a few more minutes. Please stay on to ask any questions.
Can you repeat the trailer again? What's the name of it?
Yeah, it's called, and I'll show it right here. It's called, actually what I'll do.
I just added it to the link. So that was the youtube.com. That's the trailer about the truth about reading.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you so much, Yvonne.